Tonight, we're going to talk about making permanent change, permanent positive change. And I'm going to show you 7 ways to make long lasting permanent change. See, all through our lives, we've been making permanent change. The problem is we've been making negative permanent change. And so we're going to focus on the positive. I'm going to show you some things to do to help you make long lasting, permanent, positive change. The first one we're going to talk about, number 1, is probably the most important one. Well, with 7. 1 and 7 are probably equal in importance. So number 1, one of the most important, you have to know what season you're in. See, we as people go through seasons just like the year does. We have a season of spring, which is new growth. It's a rebirth. It's watching those buds just starting and sort of nurturing those into something more. And after spring, we have to experience a summer. And summer is the area of the biggest growth. And so we continue to nurture, we water, we feed, we keep everything moving and growing throughout the summer. And then after summer, we get to fall. And fall is the time for harvest. Fall is the time we take that growth that we've been working on and developing and we incorporate it into our lives. This is where we turn knowledge into wisdom, which is a very, very important thing to do. Harvest is super important, but nothing is more important as winter, I think anyway. See, winter has 2 sides of the coin. We have to be aware of those. Winter is the time of death and dying. And I don't mean literal death and dying, although that might be part of our season, but I mean figuratively. It's about loss. It's about cutting something free, cutting something loose that has been part of our life that is toxic and no longer serving us, and letting that go. It's about loss. But at the same time, if you look outside now, if you're from where I'm from or you're experiencing the same winter, everything is dead, but there's a cleansing going on. And this cleansing that's happening is preparing the earth for a rebirth. And the same happens with us. Whenever we go through loss, a death of some sort, a cutting free of whatever it is, it's a cleansing. We're preparing ourselves for a rebirth. Somewhere a slate is wiped clean. And that's a beautiful thing to experience. Think about the last loss that you experienced, whether it's literal or figurative. Somewhere in your life, there was a slate that was wiped clean, making room for new birth that's going to come up in the spring then again. So our seasons work the same way. The difference is that our seasons, our life seasons, may or may not be like the year seasons. They may go in order, but they also may not go in order. We may stay in a season for a week, but we might also be in a season for 2 or 3 years. We have to be aware of that. Say, for example, we're in spring and we're planting the seeds for new growth. We know where we want to go and we start out on that path. But then out of the blue, unexpected, we experience a loss of some sort. So we have to jump from spring directly to winter. And we have to deal with that loss. And we have to deal then with the clean slate and preparing for a new rebirth. And then we can replant when we get to spring after we've finished off that winter section. So you have to know what season you're in. In the very first live that I did, I talked about New Year's resolutions and why those work for us and why they most times don't work for us. And one of the important things is we might not be in the season for something new. When New Year's comes around and we make that resolution, we might very well be in the season of fall in our lives. Our life might need us to harvest something that we have been growing and developing and budding before we can think about planting something new. So know what season you're in. If you do the right thing at the wrong time, it's going to end up in pain. We all want a beautiful garden, but if you plant your garden in the middle of winter, you're not going to have a beautiful garden. Do the right thing at the right time. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, understand your world. In other words, understand what triggers you. Understand what there is out there that you can grasp hold of. When we teach other people different things and when we try to influence others, we know what triggers them and we know what they can grasp a hold of and make tangible. We have to do the same thing for ourselves. Understand what your triggers are. Understand what you grasp hold of, and then grab a hold of that. You have to understand where you are. Number 3, find impact. And by impact, I mean leverage. Leverage is doing something when you don't want to do it at all. So if you want to go to the gym, you want to get healthy, but then you don't go to the gym because you really don't have time, you don't feel like it, you don't want to be sore the next day. That's because you don't have leverage. You don't have the thing that makes you do what you know you're supposed to do even though you don't want to do it. So there are 2 reasons why people will do anything. Only 2. 1, to minimize pain, and 2, to increase pleasure. That's it. Minimize pain and increase pleasure. The next time you're watching TV, pay attention to the commercials because they know this and they're going to market towards that. It's either minimizing pain or increasing pleasure. It doesn't matter what the product is. It's one of those 2 things. Those 2 things, when you get to the core of it, that's going to be your leverage. That's what's going to make you do what you don't want to do, but it's going to make you do it anyway. Number 4, interrupt the pattern. But there's a caveat to this because you have to interrupt the pattern when the pattern's happening. See, the patterns, the beliefs, the rituals that we have always had them. We've always had those. And our own patterns, beliefs, rituals, habits have led us to this very point where we are right now. It's led us here in this moment. So if you want to be in a different moment, if you want to change something, you have to change your patterns, your habits, and your rituals. But you have to interrupt what's doing. Otherwise, you'll go through the same cycle day in, day out, all the time, and you're going to end up with the same result and can't figure out why nothing's changing. It's because you haven't changed your rituals, your patterns, your habits. You would never discipline a child or a pet when they weren't doing anything wrong. That's why you have to interrupt in that moment of the pattern. Think about this. If your desire is to quit smoking, you're at work, and so after lunch, you grab your jacket, you grab your smokes and your lighter, and you head out the back door of the office to go have a cigarette. When you're done with the cigarette, you say to yourself, man, I really got to quit smoking. Next time I want a cigarette, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Guess what? Next time you want a cigarette, you're not going to do this and this and this and this, because in your pattern, in your ritual, you are making the change not in the appropriate place. It's like this. Maybe this is easier to understand. If you have a dog and you let your dog off the leash and the dog starts to run, just takes off, and you holler for the dog and the dog just keeps running, and you holler again and the dog just keeps running, you holler a 3rd time, a 4th time, the dog is running. Eventually, the 5th, 6th, 7th time you holler, the dog is going to stop and start coming back to you. When the dog gets back to you, you cannot discipline the dog for running away because the dog is no longer running away. The dog isn't in that part of the pattern. The dog is in the part of the pattern where he's responding to your command. So when the dog gets back and you chew it out, the dog is thinking, well, I responded when he called me, so now I'm getting chewed out. So the next time you let your dog off the leash, you can holler all you want to. That dog's not coming back. Because if he comes back, he's going to get disciplined. The same thing has happened for a child. The same thing happens for us. So if you want to interrupt the pattern in an effective manner, you have to do it in that very moment of the pattern. All right, number 5, you have to make it solvable. Whatever your problem is, you have to reword it so that it's solvable. And here's an example of this. How many times have you heard somebody say, why does this always happen to me? See, the brain then has to respond because we just asked it a question. Now, the brain is our primitive brain. And in previous videos, we talked about that primitive brain. It's always looking for danger. It's always looking for what could go wrong. And it will find it. It'll find a lot of it. So if we ask a question like that, why does this always happen to me? Our brain, who's always looking for what could go wrong, is going to respond accordingly. And it's going to say, because you're always an idiot, because you always do the wrong stuff. Well, the fact is, this doesn't always happen to you. And the truth is not in what the brain says. You're not always an idiot. You don't always do this. You don't always deserve it. Let's change the question. If you change the question, you're going to get a different answer, and it's going to make the brain funnel its responses to give you something productive to work with. So instead of, why does this always happen to me? Try asking yourself, why did that happen to me right in this moment? And then your brain is going to go, oh, wait a minute. I have to think about this. It's because you did this right before, and then you did this right before that. And that gave you that specific result. Change your question, you're going to get a different answer. You have to present it to yourself in a way that is solvable. A lot of times I'll hear somebody say, I'm never able to lose any weight. If you say that to yourself, your brain is going to say, well, it's because you're big boned and you're always going to be easy to see. Or it's going to say, it's because you're lazy and you never get on the treadmill. Whatever it is. The fact is, it's not that you can never lose weight, because you can't. And it's not because you're lazy, and it's not because you're big bone. It's none of that stuff. Ask yourself a better question. How can I begin to lose weight right now? And then your brain has to start to funnel, and it's going to say, well, for starters, don't eat that third piece of pie that's sitting in front of you. For starters, turn off NCIS and get on the treadmill. For starters, do this and do that. So it's going to give you that point. Whatever you ask it, it's going to give it back to you. But you have to be specific and you have to make it solvable. Number 6, create positive alternatives. So in the past videos, we talked about the 6 human needs, and every human is going to meet those needs no matter what. We're going to lie, cheat, steal, whatever it takes, but we are going to meet those needs. Anytime you meet 3 or more needs with a single action, you will create an addiction, which is really just a habit. So you've created a habit, a positive or negative habit. We're going to create positive habits instead of negative habits. So the trick to this is to figure out what needs you are meeting by the actions that you're taking right now, the undesirable actions, and find another way in your life that you can meet those same needs, but in a positive way. You have to meet the needs, because that's what's driving all of those old patterns, old rituals. You have to interrupt it, create a positive alternative from it. And number 7, which is also equally important as number 1, right at the top of the list, practice, 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 practice. And then practice some more, and practice some more, and practice some more. We've spent a lot of time in our old disruptive habits, getting the results that we don't want. You know, I'm going to be 51 this year, and it's like I spent a lot of time getting really good at being bad at what I'm really bad at. So it's going to take some time to set in new habits, to retrain myself to a better result. So when you do find that better result, you have to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. And all of these things I'm giving you are just tools. You know, and I use the analogy of when you build a car, you need a lot of different tools. But one wrench isn't going to give you the car. It's only a tool to give you a part of the car. And that's all this is. This is just a tool of something for you to use to kickstart you, to get you forward and get you moving in the right direction. Momentum is everything. Once you start moving towards that direction, you can keep falling, just keep falling forward, and it's going to be okay. So use those 7 practices, those 7 steps to create positive, lasting change in your life. I know you can do it. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.